And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird.
Mystery Babylon exposed.
Shall a man make gods unto himself, and they are no gods? Because all substance is thus ultimately an overflowing of God's substance, Kabbalah is a pantheistic doctrine. To the trained pantheist, the abstraction is the ever-to-be unknown deity. Notwithstanding the strongly pantheistic coloring of its metaphysics, the Kabbalah never attempted to belittle the importance of historic Judaism. The author of the Zohar proper, as we shall have occasion to see, inclines towards pantheism.
This might come as a shock to many people. Monotheistic Judaism, when it evolves into mysticism, becomes pantheistic. The pantheism of the Kabbalah is cleverly hidden. Like searching for a chameleon, you have to look carefully to see it. A highly esteemed and widely quoted scholar, considered an authority on the Kabbalah, gives the following example.
Apparent theistic tendencies can serve to conceal actually pantheistic views. Examples of this are Azrael's pronouncement that nothing is outside, Ein Sof, Mir Ibn Gabai declaration that everything is in him and he is in everything, or the recurring insistence in the Zohar that God is everything and that everything is unified in him, as is known to the mystics. Strictly speaking, however, the problem of pantheism does occur in connection with a number of specific questions that greatly preoccupied Kabbalistic speculation, and to which pantheistic doctrines were at least able to offer unambiguous answers.
The Kabbalist response to creation is never theistic. It depends on an emanationist approach. The theology of macro and microcosm made it complex. Sundry intermediaries and the 10 Sephiroth multiply the pantheistic tendencies.
Abandoning an unacceptable theistic doctrine is a step towards a pantheistic position. If pantheism requires a creation doctrine, some type of emanationism seems most plausible. The heterogeneous elements of this Talmudic mysticism are as yet unfused. The Platonic Alexandrian, Oriental Theosophic, and Judeo-allegorical ingredients being still easily recognizable and not yet elaborated into the system of the Kabbalah. Jewish monotheism was still transcendentalism, but as mysticism attempted to solve the problems of creation and world government by introducing sundry intermediary personages, creative potentialities such as Metatron, Shekinah, and so on, the more necessary it became to exalt God in order to prevent his reduction to a mere shadow, this exaltation being rendered possible by the introduction of the pantheistic doctrine of emanation, which taught that in reality nothing existed outside of God. The visions which these mystics beheld in their ecstasies were considered as real, giving rise within the pale of Judaism to an anthropomorphic mysticism which took its place beside that of the pantheists.
Daniel Matt is a professor at the Center for Jewish Studies at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. He received his PhD from Brandeis University and has taught at Stanford University and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. In his book, God and the Big Bang, he quoted the 16th century Kabbalist Moses Cordevero's pantheistic views. Moses Cordovero was a well-known mystic of the 16th century, and his influence continues today.
By calling God Ein Sof, Jewish mystics imply that everything is divine. The Kabbalist Moses Cordovero, writing in the 16th century, put it this way: the essence of divinity is found in every single thing. Nothing but it exists. Since it causes everything to be, no thing can live by anything else. It enlivens them. Ein Sof exists in each existent. Do not say, this is a stone and not God. God forbid. Rather, all existence is God, and the stone is a thing pervaded by divinity.
New Age guru and sage Deepak Chopra mentioned the connection between the Kabbalah and Hinduism in the New York Magazine. He admits that it's so craftily put together that most Jews would not recognize it. Here he is pictured with his close friend Rabbi Shmuley Botiak, the New Age Kabbalist.
This year, Deepak Chopra will conduct workshops in Israel. Chopra told me, most Jews don't know it, he said, but the parallels between the Kabbalah and Hinduism are amazing. He ran through a list of Hebrew words and religious concepts that sounded very much like their Sanskrit counterparts.
A Max Copper professor of Jewish thought at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem confirms the previous appellations of Chopra.
One cannot underrate the possibility that Hindu traditions infiltrated into Kabbalah, perhaps via the intermediacy of Sufi material, a fact that may be a clue to the penetration of an alien mystical technique into a Jewish milieu.
Now, there is a text within Judaism, the Chumash, known as the Bible, where we are told that Abraham sends his sons, through his wife Hagar, to the lands of the east, La'artzei Kedem. Now, we understand the lands of the east to refer to India, Hodu. The text goes on and says that he gave his sons gifts, presents, matanot. And these gifts and presents are understood to be spiritual insights of high order. And it's presumably they did go, the sons, to the lands of the east. And we find within the Indian tradition, for example, there is a historical tradition whereby a fair-skinned people came from the other side and introduced some of the earlier wisdoms into what became part of the Eastern religions. In fact, if you look into the Indian tradition, they actually named a river after the Abraham who sent his sons. That river's name is Indus, the Indus River, and in Indian, Indus means the other side. So that's a very interesting little point of conjecture, how it got there by name. Furthermore, we're told that they adopted Abraham's name as a name for one of the deities, Brahman. The word Brahman is a reassociation of letters of Abraham. Furthermore, one of the sons of Abraham is referred to in the Chumash, in the Bible, as Ashurim. Ashurim introduced the ashrams. The Veda poetry, for example, is related to the Hebrew word yodea, knowledge, insight. Then we have another term, prana, which abounds in one of these traditions, which relates to the Hebrew word pe'er, an elevated point of beauty. We also have the Indian word ram, which means exactly the same what the word ram means in Hebrew, elevated, high. You can go even further and talk about the Indian word for spiritual impurity, which is tamas, which in Hebrew is tameh. So it's absolutely fascinating to see how even at the level of terminology we have a very clear association between what we call our Jewish mystical tradition, stemming from Kabbalah, which I'll explain shortly, and some of these other traditions. And perhaps even more fascinating is at the conceptual level, where the concepts within, for example, Buddhism, one finds very clearly enunciated within Judaism, within the Kabbalistic tradition. So we certainly do find a number of very strong parallels between the Jewish mystical tradition Kabbalah and a lot of the Eastern traditions.
When we examine Hinduism with its many deities, we Westerners would be tempted to ask, how could they keep track with all those deities? Any good authority on Hinduism and the occult will explain that all these different deities reveal different attributes to the unmanifest deity, which they call Brahmanutra. Brahmanutra is the spirit that receives reverence when the Hindus worship these myriads of deities. He is called the unmanifest. yet still he is manifest through all these different gods. This is called inclusive or multi-level pantheism.
Such is the simple and natural explanation of the 33 crores gods in India. These gods were begotten and endowed with being as a result of the blind endeavor to personify that which cannot be personified, thus giving rise to idols. In the course of time, the cornerstone of the philosophic and religious world conception of their wise men found itself in the hands of the ambitious, coldly calculating Brahmanism, who broke the stone into chips and ground it into the dust for the convenient assimilation by the masses. But for the thinker, as well as for every unprejudiced Orientalist, these mishappen chips, as well as their finely crushed gravel, are none the less, from the very same stone, attributes of the manifested energy of Para-Brahman, the one that forever is, without beginning or end. The Davi Upanishad continues, "She is all the gods, those worshipped in our religion and those worshipped in other religions. She manifests as the divine beings and as the demonic beings. Therefore worship me in whatever form appeals to you, and I promise, in that very form I will come to you. This is the reason you can travel from the Mother's Temple in Kamakaya at the northern edge of India to her shrine at Kanyakumari at the southernmost tip of the subcontinent without one Hindu trying to convert you. In India, they say, there is only one goddess, therefore all other gods are real. Hindu texts claim there are 33 million gods and that there is only one divine being. All deities are different faces of that one inconceivable being."
Hindu philosophers and theologians began to systemize ideas that had not been fully worked out in the Upanishads. In the late 8th and early 9th century CE, a talented philosopher named Shankara would become the most celebrated exponent of the position which eventually became known as Advaita Vedanta. Advaita literally means not two. Advaita Vedanta therefore claims that the ultimate Brahman and the individual self or Atman are one and the same. Shankara said that the gods are lower forms of the one Brahman. He said people do not harm themselves by worshipping a personal god. Shankara himself was a devotee of the god Shiva. But Shankara believed that eventually each person must go beyond dependence on individual deities. He said that each of us will realize that all distinct gods are imperfect reflections of what he called the Brahman without qualities.
A universally accepted authority on Freemasonry documents this pantheistic monotheism.
The spirit of the Vedas, as understood by their earliest as well as most recent expositors, is decidedly a pantheistic monotheism, one God, and he all in all, the many divinities, numerous as the prayers addressed to them, being resolvable into the titles and attributes of a few, and ultimately into the one.
Knowledgeable witches like Anne Mora would not deny that the sources that I quoted are impeccable. She points out the inclusive pantheistic monotheism in the androgynous deities of Shiva and Shakti.
Of the two sides of deity, it was the female that received many different names to express her various attributes, but the male retained his name and had the attributes listed afterwards. I generally refer to the primary deities of the Indus as Shiva and Shakti, or Shiva and Uma Parvati, but over the millennia the aspects and descriptives of both deities, particularly those of the goddess, have come to be proper names. This does not reflect a multitude of goddesses or gods, but one goddess and one god, conjoined and approachable in different names, depicting ways for different purposes, under different names depicting various aspects. The duality of the god and the goddess is monotheistic approach that recognizes the inherent oneness in nature resulting from a natural twosome. A whole has two halves, yet remains a whole, and the whole may be divided into numerous segments, yet remains a whole. Shiva and Shakti are independent. As Ardhanari, they are one.
The secret doctrine of the priests of Chaldea is identical to what we just read.
The ancient thinkers, priests, who framed the vague guesses of the groping, dreaming mind into schemes and systems of profound meaning, expressed this sense of the twofold nature of things by worshipping a double divine being or principle, masculine and feminine. Thus, every god was supplied with a wife through the entire series of divine emanations and manifestations. And as all the gods were in reality only different names and forms of the supreme and unfathomable one, so all the goddesses represent only Belit, the great feminine principle of nature, productiveness, maternity, tenderness, also contained, like everything else, in that one, and emanating from it in endless succession. Hence it come that the goddesses of the Chaldeo-Babylonian religion, though different in name and apparently in attributions, become wonderfully alike when looked at closer. They are all more or less repetitions of Belit, the wife of Bel. Her name, which is only the feminine form of the god's meaning, the lady, as Bel means the Lord, sufficiently shows that the two are really one.
100 years ago, Wallace Budge was keeper of Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities at the British Museum. In his book, Amulets and Talismans, he stated that the Egyptians and the Pythagoreans revered the number one as sacred to deity.
The number one represented God. The Egyptian declared in his hymns to Ra that he was the one. The Pythagoreans made one equal the deity indivisible and embracing all things.
We previously stated that the Muslim god Allah was and still is the chief deity in the shrine in Mecca. The Quran of today has been altered to hide the apparent pagan expressions attributed to Allah. However, there is enough material in the widely read translation of Yusuf Ali to show that Islam did not escape its polytheistic and pantheistic expressions of deity by its predecessors.
To God belong the East and the West. Whithersoever ye turn, there is the face of God, for God is all-pervading, all-knowing. It was we who created man, and we know what dark suggestions his soul makes to him, for we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. Is it ye who created, or are we the creators?
We learn from the preceding quote that Allah is all-pervading, which means that he is in everything. This is inverted pantheism at its best. Then we see that sometimes he is mentioned in a polytheistic manner. There is a reason for this. Muhammad was confused. Having been brought up in a pagan environment, he was trying to separate Allah from his polytheistic surroundings, and so he refashioned him to be the monotheistic God of the Bible. Allah was and still is the head of the Arabian pantheon. Similarly, the god El is the head of the Phoenician pantheon.
El is the first of the major gods and the head of the pantheon. In the epithets that are applied to him, he is seen as the father of the gods and human beings, and as the creator of heaven and earth. The totality of the gods constitutes his family, and he presides over the assembly of the gods.
Ultimate pantheism is a creation of Satan to make us believe that all religions lead to the same God. CNN founder Ted Turner, in the magazine Hinduism Today, promulgates this religious pluralism.
There are so many different languages, so many different forms of music, and so much different dance, so many different cultures, but basically we are all the same. So I thought, maybe instead of all these different gods, maybe there's one God who manifests himself and revealed himself in different ways, different people. What about that, huh? All right.
This was stated at the United Nations Unprecedented Babylonian Gathering held from August 28 to September 1, 2000. The agenda was to promote a universal pantheistic agreement, one that considered all religions as being true. Christ's words, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me," are viewed as arrogance or even worse, religious intolerance.
Ask about the issue of proselytization, which came up repeatedly, and he, Bawa Jain, said, "I think the message is to be that each religion needs to reach out to its adherents and ask them to become more faithful to their own tradition. It is not a matter of seeking to convert people from other religions. I think that is sometimes the cause of a lot of conflict and a lot of aggravation. I really think the Christian leaders will have to sit down with the other leaders and come up with how not to engage in active proselytization, and rather create an awareness of more respect and understanding for each religion."
Here is a picture of Madame Blavatsky with her ascended masters. The occultists believe that the term ascended masters refers to those souls who, after many incarnations and life experiences, have mastered the lessons of the physical realm. They then choose whether to serve on planet Earth or to channel from other realms and dimensions. If Blavatsky was alive today, she would have echoed something similar to what was stated at the United Nations conference.
Better to believe at least in one of the qualities of divinity, personifying and worshipping it under that particular guise, which represents to each one, according to the power of his understanding, the most convenient semblance and symbol of the All, than to deny the All.
The secret strength of the Kabbalah lies within the chameleon-like pantheism that appears monotheistic to the brainwashed and pantheistic to those who are able to discern the truth. Here are a few more quotes from gurus of Kabbalistic scholarship to demonstrate that this is not mere speculation concerning this important point.
The path of immanence only rarely occurred in Theosophical Kabbalah. Pantheistic views are indeed presented in the works of Rabbi Moses de Leon, Rabbi Joseph of Hamadan, Rabbi Joseph ben Shalom, Ashkenazi, and later on Rabbi Moses Cordovero. But even these Kabbalists would unequivocally acknowledge the existence of a transcendent layer of divine. For these and for similar authors, the pantheistic or panentheistic ideas were the ultimate consequences of their emanational systems. Extreme substantialists' interpretation of emanation could, and actually did, lead to a variety of pantheistic views. Apparent theistic tendencies can serve to conceal actually pantheistic views. Examples of this are Azrael's pronouncement that nothing is outside, Ein Sof, Meir ibn Gabai declaration that everything is in him and he is in everything, or the recurring insistence in the Zohar that God is everything and that everything is unified in him, as is known to the mystics. Such formulations in the Zohar became extremely popular among later Kabbalists and in the writing of Hasidism, where they were used to bridge theistic and pantheistic opinions abounding in these texts. But if you say that the Holy One, blessed be He, exalts Himself in the world only for Yisrael, this is certainly so. They, the Pharisees, held that only Israelites are men. Gentiles they classed not as men, but as barbarians. Rabbi Zalman Shmokin said right off that Judaism's restoration did not lie with the Gentiles. He cited a passage in the Mishnah, Ethics of Our Fathers, a favorite of the Rebbe Schneerson. Love the creatures, and bring them closer to the Torah. Once you get over the idea that Goim are referred to as creatures, it's a compelling notion. Israelites were stamped with that sign of holiness and purity, for just as the supernal holy beings are marked in such a way as to distinguish between the holy region and the impure unholy region, so the Israelites are marked in order to distinguish between the holy people and the idolatrous nations who are derived from the impure unholy regions.
Anyone who investigates the Zohar and the writings of some prominent rabbis will come to the conclusion that the Zohar inherently promotes racism. In the Zohar, many times non-Jews or Gentiles are referred to as impure.
For during his lifetime he is impure on all sides. His shadow is impure, and his spirit is impure. Since impurities lie within him, it is forbidden to come near him. Though their bodies are defiled, both during their life and in their deaths, yet when alive, all the impurities within them have the power to defile others.
According to the Zohar, if a Jew took a Gentile woman to be his wife, the offspring of them would be unclean. This was the answer Rabbi Shimon gave to Rabbi Yossi concerning his question about an Israelite marrying a Gentile woman.
They are unclean while they live, because their souls are drawn from the side of defilement. For that reason, he who cleaves to a woman from the heathen nations is defiled, and the child that she bears him received the spirit of defilement. You may ask, is it not of Israel from the side of its father? If so, why should it receive the spirit of defilement? Come and behold, first its father was besmirched when he united with that tainted woman. All the more so, the child that she bears will receive the spirit of defilement upon it. Furthermore, he also transgressed the Torah.
In the English translation of the Zohar, the translators avoid using the word Gentile in the negative, but replace it with words that they can manipulate in case they are charged as being racist. They use words like idolatrous nations, impure, heathens, children of the serpent, children of Cain. Rabbi Shneor Zalman of Liadi, the founder of today Chabad Lubavitch Hasidic movement, quotes the Kabbalah extensively in his writings of the Tanya. His following diatribe towards Gentiles and his elevation of Jews is an indelible mark of his work.
The souls of the world, however, emanate from the other unclean kelipot, which contain no good whatever. Therefore, also the evil impulse and the force that strains after forbidden things is a demon of non-Jewish demons, which is the evil impulse of the nations, whose souls are derived from the three unclean kelipot. The soul of a Jew is truly a part of God above. Gentile souls are of a completely different and inferior order. They are totally evil, with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Consequently, references to Gentiles in Rabbi Shneor Zalman's teachings are invariably invidious. In general terms, they were created only to test, to punish, to elevate, and ultimately to serve Israel. All Jews were innately good, all Gentiles innately evil. Jews were the pinnacle of creation and served the Creator. Gentiles, its nadir, and worshipped the heavenly hosts. As servants provide physical sustenance for their masters, the Gentile nations were intended to provide physical sustenance for Israel. The world was only created for the sake of Israel. They maintain all nations, meaning they exist due to Israel's sake.
The now deceased Israel Shahak was chairperson of the Israeli League for Human and Civil Rights. He was familiar with the writings of the unedited Kabbalah. Disgusted with what he saw, He warned the world of how the traditional Kabbalists view non-Jews.
They believe that Satan, as described in the Kabbalah, is rational and well-versed in logic. They believe further that the power of Satan and of his earthly manifestation, the non-Jews, can at times only be broken by irrational action. The role of Satan, whose earthly embodiment according to the Kabbalah is every non-Jew, has been minimized or not mentioned by authors who have not written about Kabbalah in Hebrew. Such authors, therefore, have not conveyed to the readers accurate accounts. Rabbi Abba said that living soul designates Israel because they are children to the Almighty, and their souls, which are holy, come from Him. From whence, then, come the souls of other peoples? Rabbi Elazar said, they obtain souls from those sides of the left which convey impurity, and therefore they are all impure and defile those who have contact with them. Rabbi Elazar said, the repetition of the words after its kind confirms what we have said before, that living soul refers to Israel, who have holy living souls from above, and cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, to the other peoples who are not living soul, but who are, as we have said.
Caesar Aharon, a fearless Jewish expositor of Jewish law, became a Christian in 1998. Before his conversion, he was raised in the Jewish religion. He exposes us to many of the extreme kosher laws, which are normally not translated into English. One of these laws is concerning the rights of a Jew towards a Gentile woman.
One of the most extreme enactments related to the Gilui Ariyot made by the rabbis is the one found in the Mishnah Torah, the laws of forbidden sexual relations. Chapter 12, Rule 8 says, a Jew who has sex with a Gentile woman, whether she be a child of 3 years and 1 day, or an adult, whether single or married, and even if he, the Jew, is a minor of 9 years and 1 day, because he had willful sexual contact with her, she must be killed, for a Jew came to a disaster through her, just as if he had been with a beast.
In the English translation of the Zohar, you will not find direct statements against Christ and Christianity, not because the Kabbalists had nothing bad to say about Christianity, but because it was not translated into English. Two respected Jewish historians extracted the following from the Zohar.
The Zohar identifies all blasphemers and wicked people with the evil principles of shells, the first serpent, Cain, Esau, Pharaoh, then also Esau's empire, Rome, and Christendom. From the side of idolatry, Shabbatat is called Lilith, mixed dung, on account of the filth mixed from all other kinds of dirt and worms, into which they throw dead dogs and dead asses, the sons of Esau and Ishmael, and their Jesus, who are dead dogs, abomination and bad smell, soiled and fetid, a bad family.
Talking about murder, according to Jewish law, it is a religious duty to eliminate Jewish apostates, Jews who believe in Jesus, and other enemies of the Jewish people, as Caesar Aharon translated from the Mishnah Torah, Laws of Idolatry, chapter 10, rules 1 and 2.
We may not draw a covenant with the idol worshippers which will establish peace between them, and yet allow them to worship idols, for it is written, do not establish a covenant with them. Rather, they must renounce their religious convictions or be killed. It is forbidden to have mercy upon them, for it is written, do not be gracious to them. Therefore, if we see any of them who is being swept away or drowning in a river, we should not help him. If we see him at the verge of death, we should not save him. But it is forbidden to eliminate him by hand, or to push him into a pit, or the like, provided that he is not waging war against us. To whom these rules apply? To the Goy, but Jewish traitors, the Minim and the Epicurism, we are commanded to kill them with our own hands, and to cause them to descend to the pit of destruction. For they are a snare to the Jews, and sway the people away from God, as it was done to Jesus the Nazarene and his disciples, and to Zadok and Bathos with their disciples. May the name of the wicked become putrid.
Michael Hager was a U.S. Talmudic scholar who devoted his life to the study of Jewish sources and their publications. In this rare 1932 text, he presents the reconstruction of the ideal rabbinic society. In the Messianic era, the Gentile nations will be subdued and have to be instructed by Torah scholars.
During the time that the tree of life dominates, the tree of knowledge of good and evil is subdued. The common people will not have anything except for what the Torah scholars will hand out to them, and they, common people, will become subdued like never before. They are the children of Lilith, who is a woman in menstruation, a maidservant, a Gentile woman, and a prostitute, and they return to their roots. About them it is written, "For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a viper."
Jews who resist these appointed Torah scholars will be killed.
It is mentioned by those who are ignorant of Torah, yet are of the good side, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. So will they be at the last redemption under Torah scholars, like a slave that follows along the horse's footsteps of his Lord, just as it was called out to them at the foot of the mountain. If you accept the Torah, it is better, but if not, there will be your burial place. So he will tell them at the last redemption, if you will accept upon yourselves a Torah scholar during the redemption from the exile, like a horse rider with his attendant servant, it is best, and if not, therein exile shall be your burial.
It is clear from the rabbi's point of view what will happen to the people who resist this Kabbalistic Talmudic world order.
The wicked are to be eliminated from the scene merely because the destiny of humanity is to be guided and controlled by a new army, the army of the righteous. A change of power will have to take place, whereby the righteous will assume the responsibilities of the new state of the affairs of mankind. In general, the peoples of the world will be divided into two main groups, the Israelitic and the non-Israelitic. The former will be righteous. These nations will not exist in the ideal era, and their rule will be abolished before the advent of the Messianic age. Allied with these unrighteous nations are those peoples who possess the wicked traits of the traditional Amalekites, Ishmaelites, and Gibeonites. Before the dawn of the new era, their end will come. But withal redemption will not be complete until Amalek will be exterminated, for against Amalek the oath was taken that the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation. When these shall be exterminated, it will be as if God had made heaven and earth on that day. Hence it is written, "On the day that God makes heaven and earth." At that time God will reveal himself with the Shekinah, and the world will be renewed, as it is written, "For as the new earth and the new heaven." At that time the Lord shall cause to spring from the ground every pleasant tree. But before these are exterminated, the rain of the Torah will not descend, and Israel, who are compared to herbs and trees, cannot shoot up. Further, there is a law concerning the slaughter of foreigners, who are the same as beasts. This slaughter is to be carried out in a lawfully valid manner. The ones who do not follow the Jewish religious law have to be offered to God as a sacrifice. It is to them that Psalm 44:22 refers, "Yea, for thy sake are we killed all the day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter."
The seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, was perhaps the 20th century's best-known Orthodox Jewish leader. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter proclaimed April 18, 1978, Rabbi Schneerson's birthday as Education Day USA. Since this proclamation, all succeeding presidents each year honor a racist rabbi who spent his life teaching Jews to further the plans for a theocratic world order spearheaded by Jewish law. The rabbis must have a good laugh, seeing that on Education Day, most Americans are ignorant of their plans. The amount of money that American taxpayers pay to the Israeli government is astonishing. Grace Halsall quoted Richard Curtis, a retired career Foreign Service officer and editor of the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. documents America's financial support of this Israeli juggernaut.
We U.S. taxpayers give the small state of Israel more than $6 billion in foreign and military aid a year. This is in addition to hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars going to Israel from other parts of the federal budget. Over the past 46 years, from 1949 to 1995, U.S. taxpayers have given $62.2 billion in foreign aid to Israel. This means we've given one of the world's smallest countries, with a population less than that of Hong Kong, as much aid money as we've given all of the countries of sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean combined. The total aid to those countries amounted to $40 per person, while the aid to Israel amounted to $10,775 per person. That aid is official foreign aid. Then, outside that budget, there is a large amount of additional U.S. taxpayer assistance that flows to Israel. This additional money does not appear either on the U.S. aid or U.S. foreign assistance charts. Grants to Israel are tucked into the budgets of many U.S. agencies, ranging from the Department of Commerce to the U.S. Information Agency, with the largest chunks appearing in the Pentagon budget. If you add these additional grants, we taxpayers have given more than $83 billion to Israel, which comes out to more than $14,000 annually per present-day Israeli.
Besides all the money Israel receives from American taxpayers, we have the Christian Coalition and numerous other Christian organizations providing enormous support for Israel. Through ignorance of the Jewish religion and Bible prophecy, Christian Zionism is the most effective weapon in the Israeli arsenal to silence critics of their nefarious Talmudic Kabbalistic agenda. The following is a quote from a popular TV evangelist writing about why he became a Christian Zionist.
In June of 1978, I went to Israel as a tourist and came home a Zionist. I have traveled the world, but as I walked the cobblestone streets of the holy city, I knew I was home. My roots were there. I felt a very special presence in that sacred city that changed my life forever. As I stood praying at the Western Wall, I noticed an elderly Orthodox Jewish man praying with all his might, rocking back and forth, reciting scripture, and thought to myself, here we are at the same holy place, praying to the same God, quoting the same scripture, yet I know nothing about this man or his faith.
My question to John Hagee is, how can you be certain that you are praying to the same God while you are oblivious to this man's life and his faith? What John Hagee and many Christian Zionists fail to realize is that for many Jews, the scriptures is understood through the reading of the Talmud and the Kabbalah.
My son, be more careful in the observance of the words of the scribes than in the words of the Torah. The Zohar appeals to many Jews in a way that makes them regard it as the most sacred of sacred books, for it mirrors Judaism as an intensely vital religion of the spirit, more overpoweringly than any other book or code, more even than the Bible, does it give to the Jew the conviction of an inner, unseen, spiritual universe, an eternal moral order.
Many Christian Zionists are what Christ called wolves in sheep's clothing. They go to church, theological school, and preach in the pulpit, but when it comes to Bible prophecy, they think like Pharisees.
With the dawn of the 21st century, fresh winds of the Spirit are blowing in the church, causing Christians to examine the roots of their faith and to recognize these roots as Jewish. The king they worship is the King of the Jews. The God they serve is the God of Israel. Only when one has begun to understand the rabbinic way of thinking can you be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It pays to be a Christian Zionist. In a full-page ad in the June 11, 2002 Washington Post, Stand for Israel stated, "For decades, Jews have viewed Christians with a mixture of suspicion and fear. Some have even accused them of being intolerant or dangerous. But the crisis facing Israel has demonstrated yet again the simple truth that evangelical Christians are among the strongest supporters of Israel in the world today. A recent study by the Pew Research Center found that 62% of religious conservatives are pro-Israel compared to only 26% of secular Democrats.
Let me introduce you to some of the views of these ministers of darkness. Jewish extremists would like to see the Palestinians expelled from their land and shipped to Arab countries. Recently in Washington, numerous evangelical Christians were voicing support for the expulsion of Arabs from Palestine.
Thousands of evangelical Christians waving Israeli flags cheered last week as Knesset member Benny Elon called for the relocation of Palestinians from the West Bank into Jordan. Elon, whose Moladet party advocates the transfer of Palestinians to Arab countries, said that a resettlement of the Palestinians is prescribed by the Bible. Elon, an Orthodox rabbi: "Let's turn to the Bible, which says very clearly we have to resettle them, to relocate them, and to have a Jewish state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean." Dismissing the legitimacy of the Palestinians' claim to the land, and particularly to Jerusalem, Robertson said that the Palestinians are really Arabs who moved there a few decades ago. Their claim to that land really does not go back very far, such as it is, while the claim of the Jews goes back thousands of years. The Temple Mount, he concluded, belongs to Israel, not to the Palestinians. Founder and former Christian Coalition President Pat Robertson called for the holy city of Jerusalem to be the eternal capital of Israel, stating, "Palestine has been occupied by Yasser Arafat and his thugs. We cannot turn it over to him. I don't care if it offends Arabs or not. We must do what is right." House Majority Whip Tom DeLay echoed Robertson's opinion and said that on his recent trip to Israel, "I did not see any occupied territory. What I saw was Israel. As long as I am in Congress," DeLay said, "I will use every tool at my disposal to make sure America stands with Israel. You can write that in stone."
The Christian fundamentalists believe the only Israelis who are really listening to God are the hardline Jewish settlers who live on the West Bank and Gaza and refuse to move. The Christians trudge up to these settlements as if they were making pilgrimages to holy shrines. That's because they and the settlers share a core conviction.
You believe that God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people?
I believe it as much as I believe I'm sitting here looking at you right now.
It is theirs.
It is theirs. Every grain of sand between the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, and the Mediterranean Sea belongs to the Jew.
That includes the West Bank?
It includes every grain.
It includes Gaza?
Every bit of it. Every bit of it.
And the 3 million Palestinians who live on the West Bank and Gaza? McAteer suggests the bulk of them could be cleansed from this God-given real estate and moved to some Arab country. Nothing can come between the Jews and their land. In fact, many fundamentalists believe that when Prime Minister Rabin signed the Oslo Accords and offered to trade land for peace, it was not only a mistake, it was a sin.
They were going against the Word of God. You cannot go against the Word of God. And I believe that God stopped it.
By?
Well, by the things that happened.
By the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin?
If God wounds and he heals, if he kills and if he makes alive, if he is the Lord and he does these things, then no person dies accidentally.
You think Rabin was being punished for getting involved in the peace process?
I think that God did not want that Oslo Accord to go through.
God save us from these people.
Political analyst Jesse Alfer served 12 years in Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad. Later, he became Israel director of the American Jewish Committee.
When you see what these people are encouraging Israel and the U.S. administration to do, that is, ignore the Palestinians, if not worse, if not kick them out, expand the settlements to the greatest extent possible, they are leading us into a scenario of out-and-out disaster.
Televangelist John Hagee's interview with a BBC reporter shows why the Israeli government makes it a priority to meet with Christian Zionists.
In your office and in the library beyond, there are several pictures of you in Israel or here greeting Israeli prime ministers from the past and, of course, the present Prime Minister of Israel. Tell me, how close are your contacts with the Israeli government? Well, if I phone Israel, I could get in contact with most anyone that I wanted to talk to right away. Let me ask you this. Why do you think Israel prime ministers regard you as such an important figure? Well, one, I have been very faithful to support Israel for 20 years. Secondly, I am seen by a potential viewing audience of over 90 million people in America and Canada. I'm on 4 television networks and 125 full-power TV stations, in addition to 115 radio stations. I'm also by satellite over much of Europe, so third world nations see me. And after being on television twice a day for 24 years, there is an enormous nucleus of American and Canadian people who listen to us on a regular basis. That's why.
The previous quote tells us that the Israeli government is not interested in knowing Jesus, but using Christian Zionists like John Hagee to spread their propaganda. Christ commanded us to preach the gospel to all nations. Christian Zionists like John Hagee Ministries do not attempt to target Jews for evangelism. He leaves it up to them to ask him.
And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. There's not going to be a conversion of the Jewish people ever until the Messiah gets here. And conversion before the coming of the Messiah is not on your agenda? If a Jewish person asks me about what it requires to be a Christian, I'm delighted to tell them, but I do not target Jewish people for salvation. It is my view that a healthy relationship between believing Jews and Christians cannot be achieved by demanding theological changes or revisions. We must accept each other as we are. We must candidly remain what we are.
Christians would do well to investigate the origins of the names of Jacob and Israel instead of following Jewish fables.
Not paying attention to Jewish myths and commandments of men who turn away from the truth.
In popular etymology, the word Jacob means
taking hold of the heel, supplanter, layers of snares.
This name was given to Jacob to identify him with his previous life before devoting himself to Yahweh. 2 incidents recorded in the Bible depict him taking advantage of his brother Esau's hunger and buying his inheritance. When his father Isaac in his old age was blind, Jacob pretended to be Esau to obtain his father's blessing. After this, Jacob fled for his life, fearing Esau's wrath, and ended up in a cave where his life was changed. God renamed him Israel because he accepted God's power to overcome his wicked nature, guilty conscience, and the fear of his brother. The Talmud and Kabbalah of present-day Israel is full of deception and snares, the essence of Jacob's life before God changed his name to Israel. The New Testament does not sanction the racist state of Israel, but in fact condemns it. The followers of Christ are the true Israelites, like Jacob, have kept the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus.
Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free man. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. For in Christ Jesus neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creature. And as many walk according to this rule, peace be on them, and mercy, and upon the Israel of God.
We hope you have found this series informative and enlightening. If you would like to support this ministry, donations are welcome and may be sent to the address shown at the end of this video. Please specify, for the producers of Secrets of Kabbalah.